March 25th comedy show. My name is not actually Stash Prada. My name is just Stash. The name Stash Prada was given to me by two beautiful lesbians in Denver some time ago. I am not even a member of the Central Intelligence Agency. I won't bullshit you. I'm more to the black operatives, but I'm not even that. You see, all the action is in the proprietary companies. And I worked for two and still work for one. Bucher Vertriebsanstalt, a Liechtenstein entity. But the real action started after the wall came down. And as the actress from Bond says, God, I miss the Cold War. How did she say that? I always said that. God, I do miss the Cold War. I don't know if my first job was in 88 when I was for the first time in Polska and East Germany. But it got too hot when I worked for Atlantak Business Company, Vaduz, Wien, and Boston. Jorgen, who I knew as Energy, first picked me up in his Jetta in 1986 or 7. How was he to know that I was already with the Solidarity? And I never even told anybody till now that I was in PIS, Polish Intelligence Secret Service. Don't know why he picked me up that day. He had a call ahead. In those days, cell phones were huge. You've seen one in the film La Femme Nikita, not the piece of shit Fonda one, but the French one. Nikita. I got my head stuck in the train in Paris. But I loved it. What I really loved about it was Kato. And Chief Inspector Crisser. Chief Inspector. Chief Inspector de Sûreté. Anyway, when he took me home to meet his dad and mom, they weren't the only ones there. There was Katya or Sasha and his younger brother Pete, who's a handsome fellow. They called him Woody, but he didn't seem to resemble Woody Harrelson, whose dad was a CIA assassin. Just as the drummer, Stewart, of the fantastically handsome band The Police, was Copeland. But I am very ashamed to admit it. But as I stood in their living room, which strangely had two huge Xerox machines, I at that time knew about the Army, and my dad was a battalion commander of a combat engineer battalion and one of the best instructors at Fort Belvoir, which would later become a huge intelligence facility worth billions, if not trillions, in Fort Belvoir, beautiful Virginia. I am embarrassed to say that I never had heard of the Central Intelligence Agency though I had a worn out video of Live and Let Die and nearly watched it every month. If not every day, I wished every hour. There were two older gentlemen. I assumed they were Jorgen's grandpa and a friend of his grandpa. Incredibly, his grandpa was named Stan, and I was fucking Stan. Incredible. Anyway, the father didn't look like he was from America. Sort of a short fellow, but he did resemble some type of Viking, or at least aesthetically, National Socialist. Incredibly handsome man, and his eyes beamed out you with the type of energy. Although today he was wearing the strangest eyeglasses I had ever seen and laying on the bed with a silk shirt. Now at this time, embarrassed to say, I would never wear, and I really didn't like, even on Italian guys, gold chains. Gold chains hanging on his neck, gold chains around his wrist. Even just seconds after I shook his hand, he remarked that I was looking at his watch. I couldn't help it. It was a big chunk of what looked to be, to me, some kind of solid brass and solid gold. He breathed in with his nose and let out all this energy. I never encountered an energy from a person like this. He said, he took off the watch and was wearing it. Said, feel how heavy it is, man. I could have sworn that he said something like, my only friends are spies, but I don't know. The watch was incredibly heavy, and I put it on, weighing down my arm. To this day, I can't pronounce the name of this watch, which was aesthetic beyond belief. Someday I'll have one, but not right now. Anyway, Sasha or Katja, I could have sworn her hair was dark. But then, when I heard her giggle and say, when Dad goes to an island, they got overthrown. Anyway, I've never heard of this CIA, but I could have sworn I was being recruited. Or Jorgen said it when he went outside for a sec to play with Texas or Montana. I forget what the name of that dog was, but right away they told me he was trained by the best, the Ukrainian monks in upstate New York. Was the dog's name Tex, or the dog that I want, named Felix? I'll never know. And although I heard the dog's growls from so far, and I gathered that they lived with him in Houston, all Peter, the youngest brother, who was very handsome, said from the very beginning, and most of the time profanity. Fuck you, Dad. Fuck you, Dad. I dug it. I figured that's the way people talked. No problem. Anyway, I knew nothing, and yet I was being briefed, debriefed, recruited, out in the cold, training on the farm or not, and gone rogue, cover blown, and put on the island with the MI6 guy, Patrick McGowan, the prisoner, all in the course of about 15 minutes. What was shocking to me, and I couldn't believe, that my beloved martial arts school that made me so strong, somehow in a conversation of milliseconds, he opened my eyes and I realized it was a cult. Yes, the martial arts cult, but I desperately didn't want to leave yet. I remember lying to him that I knew only jiu-jitsu, but when he called me on it, I didn't know what to say, but he let me go. I also swore by accident, and that's when he lit up a cigarette to smoke. I am so unobservant. I am the opposite of Sherlock Holmes. And this is when I was to meet his wife, Veronique Venerskova, or Olga. I forget which. She was good looking and very intelligent. But this is what really embarrasses me. I didn't realize the lights were off to my right. And Jorgen said, well, meet my family and friends. It is a small party. And he turned the lights on. I could see the rest of the two Xerox machines, which to this day I should have asked and have been very suspicious why that is. There happened to be another guy that came out of the dark. He had all much style, and thank God I was alright only to meet this man really once. He looked an awful lot like the actor Klaus Kinski. This was a party that I didn't want to go to. I thought Jorgen just told me he was going to meet his family. That's okay. Anyway, he, unbeknownst to me, and I only figured this out a while later, he was Costa, I think. Costa? Or a Kidon? Anyway, I'm a Gentile, but he was Mossad case officer. I had a relapse and passed out when later he recommended that I read the book and watch the film The Little Drummer Girl by John Le Carré. As he took his Dunhill solid gold lighter and flicked on it one time, I can still hear the noise of his lighter, for that was a big part of my job in those days. And don't tell those Belmont Hill snobs, pimps and whores and cunts that I was a courier, just a courier. Don't say just a courier. I started out doing well. because I was given a Jetta by my father that was just as good as Andrew's Jetta. Although I would come to find out by mistake that he was an incredible driver, maybe even trained by the Bureau itself. You see, what I didn't want to tell the family was immediately I was recruited by the concert choir when I was rejected by the football team for fighting in the nude. They didn't back me up. I was forced to threaten him. I'll talk about it another time, but they said I caught a pass. The very opposite is true, and amazing to me, I'd quit the football team 3 weeks before. You see, I insisted only to play whiteout. No, excuse me. I insisted only to play defensive end. Almost half the football team surrounded me when I insisted that I couldn't play and didn't like wide receiver. Coach just put me in as defensive end. I'll kill the quarterback every time, but whiteout, I hate it. I'm not going to memorize the plays. I'm not going to do a down and in and down and out. Fuck you. In reality, the football team was the same as the one I quit twice. That is St. Patrick's in Watertown Strong. That's Watertown Strong. 30 years later, it was Watertown Strong. My experience in the clergy sex abuse was okay. I just nonchalantly shoved Brother Tom's hand off my cock with a brush of the hand, saying, Brother Tom, I gotta shower up. The secular football team was actually worse. There was a guy, I'll never be sure if he was the coach or who the fuck he was, but we were upstairs in the old ancient floor, and there was this whole idea that you had to shower up. Of course, I wanted to. But another player and I were asked to disrobe, or strongly recommended to disrobe, and some guys said, yes, I gotta get used to showering together. It's not that I didn't want to be nude, I just wanted to look of a good size, so I tried to get a warmie. Anyway, the weirdest thing is this was the old part of the house. And at some point, incredibly, Sasha, or Katya, now blonde, shouted, Dad. She didn't say Dad in his mysterious phone calls. That would be an utter ripoff from my favorite film, The In-Laws, which is the most realistic film about espionage. I challenge anyone to prove me wrong. Anyway, she shouted, Dad has a confidential call or an overseas call, everybody out of the old edition. I thought she said Old Testament for a second, but old edition. At this point, everybody left except for the father, and now there was a really, really tough man left. He looked like he might have been in the U.S. Marine Corps, but he was much bigger. His name was Bastion or something like that. I don't know. I'm not observant and I don't hear well. Or I do hear too well, but I'm not observant. I'm sorry. And I should have been wearing glasses because that's why I didn't like wide receiver. And a very wealthy man finally told me when I was caddying, not playing, caddying for the fantastic Belmont Country Club. Still exists today. Photos exist, as my boss and me would say. The old man was Stan. My name was Stanley. There was another, even much older man. Or so I thought he was older. He was spitting out a little bit of food. He turned to me and said, Stanley, can I call you Stanley? Can I style you Stanway? I could have sworn he's going, we don't have much time. You must go to Nicaragua. I said, I was always very, very respectful of my elders, but I was shocked, and I said, I was caught off guard. I said, didn't I fucking see you on the news a lot? And again, Dick. Or Ricard? Heller. Yeah. They were Norwegians, but I was told their name were Heller. A name that I learned many years ago after I flunked out of high school was the author Joseph Heller. I think he was Armenian. No, of course. Deutsch. Deutschland über alles. Well, much to my shock, the old man spitting out food said, come on. You could go to Fordham University, but the main thing is time. You see, Stan, we don't want good grades from you. In fact, we've got to make sure you get all Fs, but don't worry. We'll get you through real school, undergrad, master's in PhD, very fast. And today you'll be in control and choose your own grades. We'll get back to that in a moment. But he said Ronald would be here. My name is Bill. This is Stan. And that's Pistol. He and the kids. Along with the fucking bureau, which I swear I hate.
I want to thank Senator Bill Nelson and NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden for their extraordinary leadership.
Which I guess is a thing that
I want to recognize Dr. Buzz Aldrin as well, who's in the House.
Become my favorite, although I did not know existed yet. Liechtenstein Vaduz would become known as the headquarters of the real CIA. The CIA within the CIA, the only one that mattered.
I want to thank Senator Bill Nelson and NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden for their extraordinary leadership. I want to recognize
Legacy of Ashes
Dr. Buzz Aldrin as well, who's in the house.
The mainline CIA, and they didn't have to tell me. Somehow I was learning right away. Sucked. And the worst thing was that our great country, who won the Cold War, I found out fast that Dr. H and his family here won the Cold War. And I can't believe I said these words on my first day of the job I would have for 2 or 3 years. Was that the mainline CIA sucked, even though they won. UCH, or pistol, or shotgun, or whatever the fuck they called them, already won the Cold War. I wanted to talk about him all the time, but he really only wanted to talk about real business and human sexuality. I was transforming fast. Jorgen and I were best friends. I was in the martial arts cult, and he had the most gorgeous sensei who was incredibly tough female from Newtown, Mass, not far, which would become our second safe house. I'm ashamed to say the reason why I got into all this. I'd like to think I was being recruited, but I have to keep beating myself in the head. It was by accident. Terrible divorce. There wasn't a day that I worked for him that he didn't utter and shout the words unilateral Santa Domingan divorce. Also, attorney-client privilege, vitamin E, cock, unlimited orgasms, wetness, male wetness. My training was already happening fast. The old man is, I think, the first to use that phrase, the mainline CIA sucks. This is very shocking. You may think I'm a liar. I wish I was a liar. The reason why I believe this, and always secretly my inner core, was a war against snobs. I had to take his word for it because he was the director of it. They were teaching me this right in the living room. The other handsome guy who gave me my instantaneous download in deception, I never got his name, but he was by way of deception. An organization that would not be revealed to me its name until some months later, when I would work next door in the new edition. So the old house I thought was the Old Testament. I don't know. But the real thing that was going to happen, and when shit really hit the fan, was the construction of the incredible new addition right next door. If I had my way, I would cut that new part of the house, put it in front of Lake Cern or Loch Ness or London, downtown New York, Boston, downtown Cambridge, even Woburn, Mass, as its own. I loved nothing